विश्व में हमने युवाओं की आईटी एनर्जी के माध्यम से अपना एक रुतबा खड़ा किया है और भारत इसके बाद के लिए गर्व कर सकता है। दुनिया में हम आंख में आंख मिला करके बात कर सकते हैं। और ये मेरा साफ मैं हमेशा कहता आया हूं, आईटी प्लस आईटी इज इक्वल टू आईटी। इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी प्लस इंडियन टैलेंट इज इक्वल टू इंडिया टुमारो।
Namaskar, I am Ravi Gupta. I am Chief Executive Officer of Elets Technomedia Private Limited. Elets is an organization which was founded in the year 2003, and we have been working on creating awareness about usage of IT in education, governance, health, financial inclusion, and several other sectors. Our whole idea has been that we believe that IT is an important part of changing lives of people, and how we can use IT in an innovative manner is very important, and there is a lot of opportunities from for learning from several parts of the globe, and that is the whole origin of the World Education Summit series of conferences we started. And this is the 19th edition of World Education Summit being organized by Elets. And before COVID, these events were getting held in a physical setup in hotels or conference centers. And we have organized this event across India and across the globe. We have gone from Delhi to Dubai to Bahrain to UK to Denver to Mumbai to Hyderabad, and in a parallel series of a conference like this called eAsia, we went to Malaysia, Thailand, Dhaka, Sri Lanka, and several more countries globally. And in this online avatar of World Education Summit, we are holding it on the avatar platform, which is a 3D platform conceptualized and created by Elets. And let me welcome our delegates and speakers for this 19th edition. And in the inaugural session, we have two important speakers with us. We have Mr. Aditya Berlia, who is the co-founder and pro-chancellor of APCHE Satya University. And we have with us Professor Hemachandra Reddy, who is the chairman of Andhra Pradesh State Council of Higher Education, Andhra Pradesh. Namaskar Berlia ji and Namaskar Reddy ji. Thanks for joining us. We're very excited to have you with us. So let me welcome both of you, and I will like to make this session a bit interactive. So I will be asking questions, and I will request each of you to respond in say less than 5 minutes each, so that we are able to cover more topics. So let me start with Aditya Berlia, who is a leader in higher education space, school education space, and also he heads a big conglomerate which is into several sectors from logistics to pharmaceuticals to many other industries. So he is into education and he's also into employment creation. And I think skills, employment, and education all are interrelated. So let me ask Aditya that the education sector is right now passing through very challenging times, interesting times. For the like the examinations of 12th class have been cancelled. People have been passed, and the same thing has happened with the other classes from 11th, 10th, and 9th and 8th. So, how are you seeing this new batch which will be emerging out of schools and going into higher education without actually giving a board exams? So, does that really matter? Will it actually impact in the long run or a short run? Your opinion, Aditya, on this? I think some connectivity issues have happened with Aditya's. So let me request Mr. Reddy to respond to the question, and we can then come back to Aditya ji. Reddy sir.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Ravi Gupta, for giving yet another opportunity to interact with the participants and change makers of higher education system. At the outset, my sincere thanks to Aditya, Berlia ji, and welcome all the delegates for the 19th Summit of World Education Forum. Dr. Ravi, you posed a very pertinent question. We are at crossroads, in fact, changing times as such. Now, this concept of permitting the students to higher classes, abandoning the board examinations and passing all the candidates is quite new to the whole system. But in my opinion, probably assuming that the board examination is there, people should have prepared for it already. We took all these decisions in the most difficult times, abnormal times and very difficult times. So in my opinion, it will not make much of a difference because the quality will not change only with the examination. So that way, because its situation is demanding for such a decision, I think government must have considered all the options and safety of the people, safety of the society as such, and therefore it would have taken this decision. But in my personal opinion, I don't think it will cause any change. But difficulties arise, particularly in situations where admission, if admission is based on the board examination performance. Then the real question comes: how do you admit the candidates into various higher level programs? Because you don't have the performance rating of the students in the board examination. And we had a similar situation last year with Rajiv Gandhi University for Knowledge Technologies, wherein it's a 6-year BTech program. We draw students from 10th class from rural Andhra Pradesh and admit them, allow them to go through PUC as well as engineering for the next 4 years. And earlier it used to be based on the performance of the Board of Secondary Education, and we were giving them admissions based on the CGPA they have scored. But last year we had to cancel the board examination, and therefore we conducted a separate entrance examination. So may not be for all the programs, but some of the niche programs where demand is huge and many students aspire to be there. In such cases, identifying the merit and then providing the admissions to such students is going to be a much difficult task now. I think appropriate higher education bodies which are admitting these students into higher courses, they should decide now. And to the best of my opinion, it appears conducting a competitive examination or a common entrance examination should be an ideal option in the absence of a board examination. Hope I've answered your question, Dr. Ravi.
Sure, Reddy. You have answered the question, and let me have a perspective from Aditya ji on this cancellation of the board examination, and we having a situation where students are getting into higher education without the board. So Aditya ji,
First, thank you so much for having me. I'm always a great fan of the wonderful events you do. And it's and Sir Professor Reddy, sir, thank you so much for joining us today. And I loved your perspective on this. Let me say it from two things. One, I am very glad the board exams are cancelled. I have always been against single board examinations. I have always been against entrance examinations. In fact, one of the big things that the NEP does away with this single exam pressure. Now, what Professor Reddy has said is also right. I think historically, our Indian education system, in the interests of perceiving to be merit-based and fair, has usually had to come up with some system to allocate choice seats. And that historically has ended up in being an entrance exam, and that's been ended up being in a board exam and marks. But I've always maintained that this is a perception of fairness and equality. I think it has always done a horrible disservice to many students in our country, and I honestly see it as sort of the education dark ages that now the new NEP is taking us out. I think it's wonderful that universities and higher education institutes are forced to think, how can they capture a complete 360-degree picture of a student and not just an examination given in one day at one time in the year. I think the NEP does a wonderful job of saying that, look, there will be multiple attempts even at the same board exam. So if you're sick one day or there's something bad had happened at home and your performance is impacted, it's not that your entire career is now impacted by one day in your entire life or 1 week in your entire life, but also enabling higher education institutions to take a more holistic approach to admissions. Marks in a particular entrance exam or marks in a CU exam is no indicator of the determination, the ability, the intelligence, and the desire to succeed. Especially these days where certain learning disabilities which impact examination students are very well documented. But these students in international universities go on to do fabulously well, and they are being denied, they're being in fact discriminated against by the entrance exam and board system. I think it's a great way as the NEP comes in for higher education institutions to rethink. I do think it's going to be hard. I have full sympathy for everybody involved in the process. One, because coming up with a criteria that actually is able to encapsulate, to measure, particularly last minute, is always difficult. But second, also public perception. At the end of the day, any process that you run not only has to be fair, but it has to be perceived to be fair. Where we ended up now is also because there were always accusations, did somebody pay for the seat? Was there corruption? Was it this? Was it that? And so the search for a metric that allows you to say yes or no is always the easy answer. And I hope I hope higher education institutions this year use that to reflect on how they're going to change with the possibilities that the NEP comes in with. With regards to students, I think they'll be fine. My heart does go out to all those who spent a long time studying for the board exam and perhaps who sacrificed maybe their pre-boards and their earlier exams with the hope that they would do extremely well in the board. I do believe the government has given the option for them to sit for the exam, and I hope keeping their safety in mind, they will be cautious in doing so. But at a macro level, I think this is one of those horrible occurrences with a very good silver lining.
Sure. Excellent inputs, Professor Reddy and Aditya Berlia ji. I think you have highlighted the situation and both the challenges and the opportunities very well. And let me ask another question which is being experienced by each of us. That last around 1 year from March last year and today we are in June, the whole higher education and the school education system is like totally disrupted, both in India and across the globe. And I think we are still coping up with the second wave. and we still have no idea that if we will experience a third wave or not. Hopefully, it does not happen, but it may happen. No one knows. So it's like around 1.5 years of total tectonic shift happening in this education space. So let me start asking with Professor Reddy that how have you uh, experienced this situation? What are the major learnings, and how it is going to change higher education ecosystem forever? This 1.5 years of experience. Reddy sir.
Yeah, Dr. Ravi, I think the question is haunting almost every higher education institution today. Last more than a year, for about 14 months now. In fact, the entire process of teaching learning is grossly disrupted. We had to go through lockdowns. We had to go through restricted moments. We had to, ensure the COVID measures, social distancing, in particularly containing youth and bringing the discipline. It was the major headache or major challenge the higher education went through. But the question is not prominently about the discipline or maintaining the COVID measures, but about ensuring a positive teaching learning process, which could have replaced the traditional. For ages, we are with the traditional chalk and talk procedure method of teaching learning process. And all of a sudden, people were forced to adapt to the other methods, and we had to bring in online education, and we had to force the teacher who was not at all tech savvy to go in front of a computer, use the computer, and then deliver his lecture. And let me also tell you, Dr. Ravi, it's not so easy, a teacher who's used to chalk and talk method of teaching learning, learning teaching process. All of a sudden, he cannot adapt himself or herself to the online mode of education, because it's, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, it's a different art. Now, particularly in Andhra Pradesh, we had to completely resort to online education, and I should say we were quite successful in the last 1 year implementing online education. We could, ensure that more than 90% students participated in this online learning process, and in fact, we had conducted number of such workshops, training programs for the teachers on the methodologies, on the tools that they should use in the online education and make it very effective. And today, as a result of that, maybe initial we could overcome the initial hiccups. And today, all my teachers in the state of Andhra Pradesh, both in self-financed and public-funded institutions, they are all quite aware of the process, and they are they are adapting this process. They are appreciating this. They already have identified the advantages with the system, and they are going confident now to deliver things through online. And as part of the student community, we always had issues. Fortunately, Andhra Pradesh is covered with its, fiber network, and we reach out to almost every village today. But the issue was prominently with the gadgets that students possess in order to participate, ensure them participate in this online teaching learning process. That was a major task for all of us, and we had to group the students at one place and then ensure that teaching learning process went on through online. But at the same time, government of Andhra Pradesh has come forward with all magnanimity and with all its will to provide laptops to all the students, and the process is set on roll. And maybe in a couple of months from now, all the students will have laptops who are in higher education system. So that way, government also supported the initiative of higher education system of Andhra Pradesh, and Honorable Chief Minister is quite dynamic, and he believes in change. So that change is rolled out in the state of Andhra Pradesh. Dr. Ravi, you were also asking about a permanent use of this. how can we actually change the system forever? And very recently, UGC also rolled out a concept note on the blended learning mode. And it's a worldwide accepted fact that blended learning brings out quality in the graduate pursuing higher education. So Andhra Pradesh is now particularly making efforts to embrace the blended learning model. The universities are getting ready, and we have started developing the entire infrastructure. And particularly to reach out to students living in every nook and corner of Andhra Pradesh. I think in the last vacation also I was mentioning, we came out with the concept of remote learning centers. Now, as part of the government of Andhra Pradesh has initiated establishing a remote learning center in almost every village. We have 13,000 villages. In all these villages, we'll have remote learning centers. So that makes the online teaching learning very effective. And at the same time, the State Council of Higher Education, Andhra Pradesh, my organization, which I represent, we have created a state level learning management system. We started bringing in best of the series of lectures by the local talent. No, we are not depending on the higher education. Content prepared by eminent professors of reputed institutions, because we always felt that there is the students of this level may not appreciate that teaching, and somewhere they were not very happy. Like, you have plethora of options, Coursera, NPTEL, etc., etc. But we started building our own content, and I think, in Andhra Pradesh, we are taking very concrete steps to take the complete advantage of this blended learning that is going to prevail for quite some time here on. And in my personal opinion, probably online education cannot completely replace the traditional teaching learning process, but the blended learning mode, in my opinion, will be very, very effective in improving the quality of education, higher education system. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Reddy Saab. I think you have explained very well how the government is trying to help the students by providing them a laptop, and UGC also like taking a proactive step of talking about blended learning, and that perhaps is the future. Let me ask Aditya from industry and private university perspective, that how has been the last 1.5 years, and how you are going to see the next 1 year, next academic year. How are you seeing that?
First I must thank Professor Reddy for a wonderful summary of, I think, what global challenges. I think, although he was speaking about Andhra Pradesh, I think everything that they have done and they have experienced is something that we can say that was at a global level. For us, we were very fortunate. We had over-invested in information technology to a point where we were thinking we have over-invested. And within 24 hours of the lockdown, we were able to do fully virtual classes, personalized one-to-one. And within a few weeks, we were running all exams, unit tests, university exams and such. Now, behind the scenes, I didn't sleep for 1 month. I don't think any one of our faculty and staff slept. Anybody who comes and says ki bhai, it was easy, 2 minutes my switch was turned and everything worked, is lying. It was a horrible experience. All of us stayed 24 hours online because, getting the technology up for us was very easy. But the human element, as Professor Reddy said, faculty and professors were also under lockdown. They were in their homes. We had to buy devices and send it to them. Many of our students, and a large number of students, are from scholarships. We are a non-profit, although we are private, so we focus on merit. Had went into their small towns and villages all across India, and to then bring them on. We first started with video. We'd been using things like Zoom for years, but really try to figure out how to do even a more blended model, so to speak, of personalized education. But what we also quickly realized is we were pretty much unique. I think it took other private universities at least 30 days, 40 days more than us And many public universities, even 6 months, 7 months, even 1 year later, were unable to do online examinations or any sort of examinations. And so I think it created a very difference of haves and have-nots. And I freely admit we had the luxury to do this. A lot of public universities who are serving in very, very at-risk populations just simply don't have the ability, the investment, and the infrastructure. I won't go through the entire COVID-19 experience. I've spoken enough, but I'll try to look at the key learning things that we've had, and now we are going forward. One, I think, I think the most impacted people in all of this are the regulators. I think Dr. Reddy would agree. If you were talking earlier to any of the regulators at the central government, this notion of blended, this notion of distance education, this notion of all of this was not considered very seriously. And in fact, it was only very progressive leaders there who were, and we do have very progressive leaders, I must admit, in our higher education regulatory, who were still voicing their opinion, but they were being held back. This is, correspondence course, all the reputational risk and all for universities that come with that. You should have one physical campus, you can't have two physical campus, one state campus, two state campus, and all of that went out the window. I think suddenly they realized that if you're able to recognize 100% virtual as real, then at some point you have to acknowledge that your regulations are not working. And I think the NEP came at the very right time, 6 months worth of pandemic experience, and it codifies it reasonably well. That you have to take your old assumptions and throw it out the window. That said, I think as higher education systems involved, I've always maintained that a higher education institution, at the end of the day, in the 21st century, is there to provide structure. Any student can independently, without any higher education institution today, go online, run a couple of courses, get a degree, get certificates, get the education they need for skills and all, and they can apply for jobs. The purpose of higher education institutions is to provide a well-rounded structure, a curriculum, an ethos, an environment. Now, whether you create that environment in the physical space or in the virtual space requires a lot of effort. Second, there's a huge amount of personalization and customization. The problem with massive MOOCs is that they are massive. You're not going to get a 25-person class or a 50-person class or a tutorial class running. And I think, there are plenty of YouTube videos you can learn from, some of them better than your own professors. But that personalized attention, that mentoring, that one-on-one question, that is where higher education institutions really have to step in. And both work on a blended model and both work in a real model. I think what has now been interesting, if you had asked me this question in November, it's very different in May. We've not only seen the good parts of online, we've seen the bad parts of online. We've seen the limitations, and we've really pushed up against them and said, what can we do? What can we do? And I think that has taught us all a key lesson. I definitely say physical is very much there, needed and required. Apart from just the mental sanity, is that I usually do a 2x2 matrix. People with high resources and determination in one quadrant, and then you have the rest. And unfortunately, if the purpose of our higher education institution is to provide structure, support, ethos, environment, culture, values, behaviors, which is why we are there for, right? You provided for the three quadrants. The people who are highly determined and highly resourceful, they just breeze through higher education. They breeze through, they'll get to the top universities, they'll go through, the university will even ask, what was my contribution to these people? They just, went from A to Z on their own, right? But the vast majority, the 99% of people are in those other three quadrants where they really need that ethos, that thing. And I think a physical campus really plays a long role. We were very clear that we would not open unless we thought across our 16 plus campuses that we would follow all government directions, and we will also ensure that the safety of our students, faculty, many of our faculty members have been with us for 20, 30, 40 years. Many of them have sort of superannuated, particularly our very distinguished researchers and professors, and who are at risk. Fortunately, the last 2 months, we have lost many of our colleagues. I've lost a former mentor as well, who was a former HRD Secretary of India during this time. And that unfortunately still continues. I think we believe, and then we've seen this in the US, we've seen this in UAE, we've seen this in Malta, we've seen this in the UK, that as vaccines start to come in, as we have 18 plus vaccines available very regularly, I think then we are going to see campus open up. But I do see the legacy of COVID digitalization continuing. If nothing else, as Dr. Reddy had said, you start off with the chalk and talk problem, right? And I would like to think that most of our faculty weren't at the chalk and talk level, but I'd be lying if I told you all of them were like the super faculty who are the multi-dimensional online stuff. But they became the same celebrated vice chancellors who we had, who had how many patents under their name and were leading great scientific bodies, still needed an assistant before the COVID-19 pandemic to set up a Zoom call even with the governing board, right? And now they were at home teaching classes with one phone here and sitting on a glass wall or a window and sitting and chalking up, and they loved it. They went from apprehensive to scared to how will I do it to I have to do this, it is my duty, to thriving in it, and now they're coming up. So what excites me most is not so much whether blended, physical, this, that, etc., but the empowerment faculty members now feel that a lot of the people, particularly who are 40 plus above, 50 plus above, who were scared or apprehensive about the digital revolution, they weren't comfortable in this space, have now become comfortable. And I think that really accelerates India's ability to deliver for our students. And that will prove a treasure trove of innovations that go ahead. But I'm still very cognizant that I think Professor Reddy alluded this to it very well. We did see an absolute have and have-nots on the digital divide. In school education, we were buying devices and iPads and laptops and whatever we could to ship out to some of our students who couldn't afford it. We had to get data cards there. In many areas, the connectivity is not enough. We had to figure out audio calls and take, audio commentaries, listen to the class, even if you can't participate fully there. And I think that is something the government, particularly with 5G coming on board, would really have to focus on, is how do we make sure that this doesn't happen again. But I'll tell you one thing, Ravi ji, if this happened in 2010 or even 2015, we would have been flattened. It is a godsend in many ways that in 2020 and 2021, the level of telecom penetration, the level of bandwidth, the level of speed that we have was able to at least enable what we did. We had been doing, we were fully in the cloud in 2008. We were doing all virtual simulations in all 2010 and 2015. And honestly, the bandwidth wasn't there for our consumers and for our users. I think 2020 was a nice place to be from telecom wise, but I think it just shows the amount of investment the government needs to do in infrastructure. And I'm very happy to see leading lights like Professor Reddy, double down on that commitment and really take it forward.
Perfect. Aditya, thanks for highlighting several aspects, including the telecom infrastructure, which has been our saving grace in these troubled times. Let me ask Professor Reddy that what are the higher education reforms or initiatives which you are planning in this state of AP, and how are you seeing the this impact of NEP and the UGC guidelines which have been coming up in the last 1 year, and also like AICTE has also reformed its many of its systems and processes. So what are some of the key reforms and initiatives which have happened or going to happen?
Yeah, Dr. Ravi, in fact, I should thank Aditya Berlia ji, for reinforcing my views and then, articulating so well about the current situation. In fact, there were so many learning points for me too. Thank you, Aditya Berlia ji. And you are asking about the initiatives that we took in the last 1 year. There were quite many. In fact, I may not be mentioning all of them for want of time, but let me highlight a few things. What we thought was the curriculum was so outdated, and therefore we have decided in first go, we have decided to change the curriculum, entirely redesign the curriculum. And we did this exercise much before NEP was rolled out, but we are very happy that we are in line with NEP this way. We very salient features. In fact, when Aditya ji was talking about his students and his teachers, I obviously felt I don't have such a luxury, because I have to cater to the entire cross section of Andhra Pradesh. Haves, have-nots, and meritorious, average, and mediocre. All this, I have to do. And therefore, any design that we do, it cannot be more ambitious and then leave out some section of the students in order from participating in the learning process. So we were very careful, and we designed the curriculum in such a way that the UGC stipulated standards are maintained, and we brought in 20 to 30% of the skill programs into the curriculum. And a very important initiative we took is 10 months of mandatory internship for every student before he rolls out of higher educational institution. Now, I need to inform you that when I'm talking about internship, I'm talking about providing internships to the tune of 3 lakh students or 3.5 lakh students every year, because that's my size, that is my enrollment number. So altogether, I have more than 14 lakh students in the entire higher education system of Andhra Pradesh. But then we have explored the possibility, and we have devised a system wherein the entire internships can be provided. In fact, I am thankful to the government, which readily supported our initiative and instructed all its government mechanisms, departments and engineering departments to participate in the process and take interns from higher education systems into their systems. So that is one of the major initiatives. Now, I was talking to you about the cross section of the students, huge variety that I come across. I've designed the curriculum with a minimum number of credits, where aiming at an average student who can very comfortably pursue these credits, acquire these credits. And to give a motivation to a fast learner, a quick learner, we have designed the minors and majors. And major is one who takes additional credits in his own domain. Of course, I need not explain at this point. But the real change we brought in is in terms of minors. And we did not restrict the student to certain number of minors, which normally the curriculum defines. But today we said any minor, which amounts to 24 credits. Let BOs design, let student design and appeal to the BOs about his minor of his interest. And it can be dance, it can be art, it can be anything we said that can be a minor, and in combination with anything it can be pursued. So these are some of the initiatives that we brought in here. Like I already mentioned earlier that we have come out with a huge learning management system for Andhra Pradesh, and we propose to establish learning management systems, remote learning centers at every village in Andhra Pradesh. Thereby, the content, every institution, without having to invite the student into its campus physically, can push the content and can push the assignments, can push the quizzes straight away to these remote learning centers. And thereby, the engagement becomes much more stronger. What happens, particularly the problem with the day scholars is, when once they leave the school environment, college environment, probably they are into a new environment, and they get disconnected from the college, and only they get reconnected to the college only when they come back to the college. Now, through this remote learning centers, what we are proposing, we planned a continuous engagement of the student by the educational institution. This is one major initiative that we are taking up. And the next one is we thought of, effective exchange, continuous exchange of ideas and knowledge between the educational administrators. We have 25 state-funded universities, and parallelly, we have about 7 centrally funded institutions. And hitherto, the centrally funded institutions were behaving very independent. They were not interacting with the society, with other institutions of Andhra Pradesh, because they were reporting to the MHRD straight away, and the 25 state-funded institutions reporting to the state government as if they both behaved like two different entities. Now, today we created a higher education planning board. We brought in all vice chancellors under the board, and this board, we thought, meets at least 4 times in a year, and they continuously discuss the best practices, the innovations, the thrust areas, and the new verticals that can be built. And particularly, I need not mention here the centrally funded institutions. Obviously, they are of higher level institutions, and interacting with them, probably the state level institutions will also absorb those best practices, and then they try to implement. And also, we thought of establishing a state research board, to give a direction to all higher education institutions. Earlier, I said I'm talking about 29,000 higher education institutions and 25 state-funded universities in the state. They were all behaving very individual and sporadic, reports of very good research, purely due to the motivation of the individual professor or a teacher. But now we wanted to channelize this. We wanted to ensure a good connectivity with the sponsoring bodies and research organizations, industry with our educational institutions. We have established a state AP state research board here at APCHE. And also the quality parameters is bothering us because, I already spoke to you about 2,900 institutions and policing them or maintaining standards and making them, because 87% of the space is occupied by self-financing institutions. Some of them are really good, some of them are very commercial. Probably ensuring quality of to all quality education to all students joining all these higher education institutions was one of the biggest target for us, and therefore we established a quality assurance cell in the state of Andhra Pradesh. And also the government took a very drastic step. It has issued a GO asking all higher education, mandating all higher education institutions to get accredited by NAC or this body, Quality Assurance Cell, that is established in this AP State Council of Higher Education, will at least certify that they are at the level of accreditation. So now after that, if those institutions which fail to meet the criteria, they'll be closed mercilessly. So this message is given very strong to all higher education institutions that quality is the yardstick or the parameter that goes well. And so these are some of the initiatives that we have taken. Ravi, if time permits, maybe I'll elaborate a few others.
Sure. I think Professor Reddy, you have highlighted several initiatives, and many of them are major initiatives which are going to impact lakhs of students across the state. So congratulations with you for taking so much effort. Let me ask Aditya a question about the private universities. In last decade, the number of private universities in India have increased dramatically, and every month we are hearing about one or the other private university being planned or being announced by one or the major groups of the country. So what's your perspective on role of private universities in growth of higher education in India, and how do you see the past, present, and the future? Aditya, over to you.
So let me put this in two ways. I think one of the greatest failures of India in the last 30 years has been the recognition of the private role in education. And it has been a dramatic failure. If I compare what happened in the pandemic to every other leading country, whether it's US, UK, Europe, whether it's the Middle East. The government worked hand in hand every day with the private sector to deliver for their students. And somewhere in India, although we are a non-profit and a genuine non-profit, the difference. There's non-profit and there is Namka non-profit, right? The kind of investment that is required in India to really grow our education sector will not happen if there is an adversarial view between the government and the private sector. I think that is something that needs to be acknowledged. It needs to be acknowledged across the government. It should be acknowledged. I think those in the education departments that know it very well, they are very positive, they're very progressive. The regulators are very progressive. I think the other parts of the government, including company law boards, including tax people, including all sorts of other departments, really need to start looking at private higher education as an essential role player in this country and a 1:1 partner. I think the NEP goes far in acknowledging that, but I hope the spirit of the NEP is not just restricted to the education side, but pervades the entire government. If you look internationally, the top 100 odd top universities across the world are basically private universities. And those universities exist not just because of private funds, but because they have worked very closely with their governments, whether it be in terms of jobs, research, skills, development, funding all across the board to create ecosystems. And it's those ecosystems that really drive growth. And I think that is something that has been still missing in India. And I think this is the opportunity that a lot of groups see coming in, that they are able to bring that level of ecosystem because of their, the good groups. I mean, there's a lot of silly people entering this space. But I'm talking about the genuine good groups who really have a reputation, a background, and a willingness and a desire to do something different. I love what Dr. Reddy said. One of the things which I've been saying during this pandemic, particularly after the NEP came out, not many people read the original NEP document. There were 3 versions. I read all 3. 600 page, the 300 page, the 90 page, the 65. Then finally, I think they had to throw out 62 pages to make it 62 before it came in. But I think, when I was very hardcore, the architect, came to one of our functions online and he said we were more than ready for the NEP. In fact, we were the guiding lights, so to speak, on really pushing this NEP out. But I think one of the big things that they specifically have targeted is that they believe more than 50 to 80% of education institutions in India, both public and private, need to close down. And I fully support that. It's hard, it's harsh, it's sad, but it needs to happen. I think in the dark ages of education, the last 20, 30 years, we have allowed a large number of government and private institutions to proliferate under a regulatory mechanism. You can keep laying the blame at center, state, government, up, down, people, individual, corruption, whatever which you want to do so. But the fact is that we have a large swath of the ecosystem that is just not there. It's unable to deliver on quality. And certainly with the metrics that the NEP set in, and certainly with the ambitions that regulators like Professor Reddy comes in, they will not be able to meet those. And I think what is the need of the hour is for the government to work with private industry and work with government's own institutions. I don't want to name specific universities, but there are certain universities which have thousands and thousands of government colleges, many of them which are useless. They are empty. They haven't really done their job. They really need a refurbishment. So it's not just the private part, it's the government also has to take a very clear role. And the NEP goes out and says they said it much more clearer in the previous drafts. I think they had to water it down for political reasons in the final draft, is that they believe 50% of the ecosystem has to find a way to close. Now, I think where all of us come in, where the government comes in, is finding a graceful, dignified way to do it. No one wants to go and shut down randomly education institutions across the country. There's an infrastructure that has been built. There are people with good intentions who have done so. They have been unable to maintain the quality. They've been unable to do it. That doesn't mean that, we should not presume they were doing something wrong or they're incorrect. I think this is a very bad notion that comes in every regulator's mind in India, that, we have to somehow punish people. There is no punishment required, but they do need to be given a gentle, graceful path to exit. allow them to merge. Allow them, if they're private players, allow them a mechanism to recoup their investment. If it's a government public, allow their faculty to merge in with existing institutions and get retrained. I think more than anything now, for the NEP to be successful and for this ecosystem to grow, we need a graceful methodology of closing down institutions, of merging them, of getting this. And unfortunately, I wish this was just something that the regulators had to do in the education side, because of the physical assets, because of land, because of company law, because of charity law. It requires a concentrated effort. I am very proud if an entrepreneur who had started a for-profit education center disguised as a non-profit raises his hand and say, "Bhai sir, mere se nahi ho raha, help me leave." And the government should say, thank you for not fighting. You agree, we agree. Let's find a way for you to exit. Let's find a graceful way for your students to be taken care of. Let's find a graceful way for your faculty to take care of. We don't want to see, suddenly hundreds of thousands of students without a campus, or, faculty without jobs. We should find a graceful way to bring them into the system, to allow them to leave without liability, no harm, no foul. You tried, you failed, that's fine. We allow you to exit with grace. And I think that, to me, is going to be one of the biggest things that we have to do. I think new entrants and exits will always happen in any sector, in any place, and that's always a good thing. And I am very happy to see a lot of groups coming in. I honestly hope that they have come in with the right intentions and the right long-termism. When we were setting up our universities in higher education, we were very fortunate to have some of the presidents and chairs of the leading universities of the world on our advisory boards and recommending us. And the first thing that I was told, Aditya, it takes 100 years to build a legacy of a institution. So you start with a 100-year institutionalized governance system. Before that, it's not going to happen. And the second thing is that, a university was never designed to make money. It was always designed to lose money. The very nature of a university, the very nature of a system and substance is always supposed to lose money. It's designed to lose money. It's never supposed to be able to make money. And I think that's why you see across the world, the top universities. I mean, I had the pleasure of attending Stanford for my undergraduate, and then Harvard Business School for my MBA. I am on their fundraising committees for the last 2 years for my class. And I'm astonished how open they are, that we need money, and we are only able to deliver this quality of education because we get a lot of money from people, and they charge money from students. They ask regularly money from alumni. They ask money from government, and people are very happy to give them money because they see them doing a great job. And I think one of the things that we need to start moving towards is an ecosystem which recognizes the role of private education as an essential part of the ecosystem, but second, also realize, I'll give you a small example. Dollar for dollar, rupee for rupee, the entire annual central government education budget, higher education budget, is equal to the annual higher education budget of Harvard University. That's just one. One US university has the same annual budget as our entire country. So you have to understand the level. And if we are saying we're going to be competing globally, we're going to compete against global institutions, yes, India is slightly cheaper, but not that far anymore. Our parities in terms of salaries, in terms of fighting for talent, is all the same. So we need a massive amount of money in this sector. We need huge amounts of investment, but that investment will only come if it's treated kindly and if it's treated with respect. And I think that's why I love new players coming in with new universities, but more than just new universities, we need a wall of money. For me, I would love if our finance minister got up and said, we have $200 billion of investor FDI coming into higher education. That to me would say something, that it's a drop in the bucket compared to what needs to be done. But it's certainly 10, 20, 30 times what the government is able to do, just because of the finances being where they are under COVID-19. Everybody understands that, but they need to open the tap. But then they need to make that money feel welcome. They can't tell the money that we're going to send you 200 tax notices. They can't tell that money that once you've come, you can't leave. They can't tell that money that you have come now, you are now a non-profit. why would somebody, and we've had foreign education acts. I took those acts, I went to the top universities across the world and said, sir, will you come to India? We will give you free campus to come to India, forget about our government. And behind the scenes, one of them said, yeah, we are non-profit private universities, we are government universities. Why would we go to India to help India? If we were going to invest the money, we will bring Indians here, teach them, and to do it. And people give the example of the UAE, that NYU came here and then John Hopkins came here because the UAE government gave them billions of dollars of money to come there. They didn't invest an iota of their own funds. So I think there has to be a reality check on the funding level at higher education. And I think the government should open its arms. I have great faith in Prime Minister Modi's ability to raise funds for the country. His great diplomatic support he's done. Our finance minister making sure that FDI is something that the government supports. And I think education, especially higher education, should be completely on that radar and saying our target is $200 billion of investment in the next 5 years.
Fantastic points, Aditya. I think you have touched several aspects of the higher education reforms which are needed, from closing the non-competitive ones to attracting FDI in higher education. I think your inputs are highly valuable, and I hope some action happens on it. And we are at the end of this session, and in the last round of it, we have like 10 more minutes. I wish to ask Professor Reddy that what are the opportunities for government institutions and private institutions to collaborate, and is there something being attempted in your state, if you can talk about it?
Yeah, Dr. Ravi. In fact, it was a learning experience listening to Aditya ji again. And he was talking about private institutions and their graceful exit. He was also talking about regulatory mindset. Those self-motivated institutions, there are no issues. In fact, I was talking to you, 87% of the space in Andhra Pradesh higher education system is occupied by the self-financing institutions. And for that matter, these institutions are designed to be no-profit institutions. They are not supposed to make profits out of this. But we all know the real story, it's happening. But the question comes to the regulator is about ensuring minimum quality to the students, because ultimately we give the affiliation, we give the approval to these institutions. That means we are giving an assurance to the student that you get a minimum quality of education if you go there. See, on my assurance, a boy, who aspires to build a wonderful career for himself, who carries all his aspirations and his family aspirations, he goes and joins. And now it is also the duty of the regulator to ensure that this minimum standards are met. And we are talking about those institutions which are actually dragging down on a lower side. So that with that clarity, I say we in Andhra Pradesh, we don't distinguish between government-funded and self-financed institutions. We gave all through. We gave equal privilege to all this. Now, very recently, the government of Andhra Pradesh took a decision that those private universities established through an act of Andhra Pradesh legislation. We said we will take 35% of the seats. We will supply meritorious students to you, and we will fund their education completely, both the lodging and tuition fee expenditure. This is the act, very recent amendment to the act. And that means what? The government wants to identify itself with the private institutions. We are all very proud of these, some of these private institutions which are really doing a great job in terms of the quality in higher education. And it is also the government wish that we shall also ensure that some of the poor students, students from the disadvantaged sections can also gain access, should also gain access to such premier institutions. And therefore, the Act amendment we brought in here is ensuring 35% of admissions to the meritorious students for whom the entire expenditure will be borne by the government. So that way, we are actually erasing the boundaries between the state-funded and self-financed institutions. Absolutely, we feel it's part of the entire higher education system. Because you see, my equation is quite simple. See, I occupy only 13% of the space. I cannot go on concentrating only on this 13% of the space because I have a broader responsibility. Now we are talking about equity, inclusiveness, and we actually are taking everyone into view, and we are trying to evolve uniform systems. And today we issued a new regulation to establish an institution. We did not distinguish between a private institution and a government public funded institution. Norms are the same. Hitherto they were different. A public funded institution need not, satisfy any of the norms. Now, the government will issue a GO, they sanction a college, and they sanction certain number of courses, and infrastructure is added a little later. In fact, Aditya he was also talking about a few public funded institutions earlier. Now, through this regulation, we said the regulations for establishment of an institution is the same both for public funded as well as self-financed institution. This is a very drastic step that we have taken in the state of organization. Now, Dr. Ravi, you asked a very good question. Look at in Andhra Pradesh at least, we respect the self-financed institutions, and we don't distinguish between the public funded and self-financed institutions. So to you.
Fantastic, fantastic. Professor Reddy, I think you have highlighted a very important point that you are treating both these institutions at equal level, which is a very positive signal. And last question to Aditya, that Professor Reddy had mentioned about that in each state there are institutions which are state financed, there are institutions which are centrally funded, and both operate as independent entities. And there is no mechanism of collaboration. And he was talking about how he has initiated several steps to bring them together on a single platform for collaboration. So do you see that similar step is needed in other states for bringing up collaboration between IITs, IIMs, and state universities along with the private universities? Are there scopes for collaboration between the public sector and the private sector in the university system? Aditya ji, over to you. I think some connectivity issue with Aditya. I can't see picture. Let him rejoin. I think our speaker is going to join soon, and we'll be ending with.
I think.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No. Yes. I was just saying, I deeply admire regulators like Professor Reddy. I think he's extraordinarily progressive, and the steps they are taking in Andhra Pradesh is truly a joy to hear. And Dr. Gupta, what I've realized is true people in education, when I talk these views in private to them, they don't disagree with me. Whether it is at the highest levels at the state or at the center, anybody who's actually been in the education system 5, 10, 20 years, they've gone through the entire system, they've gone through the extreme socialists, they've gone through the other side, and you come to an understanding that, look, fundamentally quality is quality, doesn't matter who is, where is, what is, as long as we can maintain quality, everything else, you have to leave to other mechanisms. And I think for me, the NEP, therefore, And my deepest worry and fear, people like Professor Reddy are not only implementing the NEP, but in many ways they are trying to push far ahead. But a year onwards of the NEP being passed almost is going to come, and we are due for the anniversary in 3-4 months. Because of COVID-19, we haven't been able to really see any bills or changes within the ecosystem of education. And for me, it's always, in particularly in the past 5 years, I must thank most of the regulators we worked with. We've never really had any, we've tried some very innovative things. That if you come to our university, for example, since 2010 when it started, you don't sign up for a degree, you sign up for units, and then you make your own way to find your degree. This is a standard anywhere else in the world, right? We've been doing the credit systems, we've been doing all this stuff we've been doing for, since the 1970s. And all of this, by the way, is in the UGC documents. This is not new. Our leading lights in 1960s, and I did a 300-year literature review of all the education policies. India was the leading light in 1960s, 1970s. Only post-emergency that, when we had an exodus of our top academics, that we entered this dark ages of both regulatory and systems, where we started this license Raj, this quota checkbox things. And even those people who used to do that have also put up their hands and said, okay, we need a new system. So I think there is broad agreement among all regulators and all public and private that the present system can't continue. I think the NEP is the genesis of that in one form or the other. I think if we just go down that route and start implementing things, see, Ravi, so have true collaborations. People must be considered equals. You cannot have a collaboration between unequals or when there is disrespect or there is discrimination that is happening, right? And I think one of the things the NEP does very well, it tells regulators, you regulate quality. If you can demonstrate holistic quality in an education institution, the same regulator should be able to regulate an IIT or an IIM. The same regulator should be able to regulate a public college. The same regulator should be able to regulate a private college. If you're, why do we have this legacy systems in which IIT or IIMs don't put under AICT or UGC, they will destroy them. Then why are they regulating the rest of the institutions if they'll destroy them? No? Either you trust them to regulate or you don't trust them to regulate. So I think the NEP is a great way. I think second, is the notion of autonomy. I think a lot of the problems that we run into, one is the trapping of the lack of imagination. Excuse me. So when I talk to people and professors, and we collaborate with universities across the world, we have faculty transfers, we have research collaborations, we do joint journals, we have student exchanges all the time. And in all of these, the entire problem when we've tried to do it with Indian universities, somebody, particularly a registrar somewhere, will say that this is not possible. This regulation, that regulation, they are under that system, this recognition, that recognition, all of this, right? And so I think once you allow both public, and a lot of public colleges, by the way, very good public colleges are as bad off as private in terms of being over-regulated. Once you have both public and private colleges standing up for quality, as Dr. Reddy says, no one is defending the bottom. No one is defending the bottom, public, private, no one is defending them at all. But even the top 20%, top 30%, if they are able to prove to a regulator who is I mean, I see quality actions, the collaboration that works. Things happen beautifully, and we've seen this in Canada, we've seen this in China, we've seen this in US, we've seen this in Europe. You tend to create education clusters, keep the enabling framework. I think the NEP is that enabling framework. Only fear is that by the time it actually gets fully in place, and not just from the education side, again, the holistic 360 government change to make it happen, we might have lost, and we keep telling you lose an entire European country, because 1 year means 15-20 million students let down. which is the entire size of a standard European country. And so for us as educators, whether you're on the private side, the regulatory side, and I'm on various committees, so I sometimes wear both. We have a unique responsibility. Time matters. I've now become a little bit known for saying this. I keep telling people, don't tell me vision 2005, 2010, 2020, 2030. Tell me what is vision July 2021. वो मुझे बताओ. Tell me vision July 2021, 2030 is too far away. By that time, 100 million students would have been deeply impacted.
Sorry, Aditya. I think excellent points as usual, and I think your emphasis on speed is very, very important. As if we look at Middle East countries, they do the reforms and they do the implementation really, really fast. And we are into a 10-year vision or 15-year vision or 20-year vision cycles. So thank you for a amazing discussion. Both the speakers, I think we have learned a lot, and I hope and pray that NEP gets really implemented really, really fast. We are losing time. And let me thank on behalf of the 19th World Education Summit both of our speakers. If we can have speaker certificates on the screen, please. Thank you, Professor Hemachandra Reddy ji, who is the chairman, Andhra Pradesh State Council for Higher Education, APCHE, Andhra Pradesh. Thanks for joining and giving your very, very valuable perspectives. And thank you, Aditya Berlia ji, co-founder and pro-chancellor of APCHE Satya University, for joining us and enlightening us so well. Thank you so much, and we will end this session here, and we will start our next session at 11:30. So with this, namaste. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. It's my pleasure meeting Aditya ji. Looking forward to meet him again. Thanks for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you so much, Udaji, and Dr. Reddy, deeply inspired by all the reforms you are doing in Andhra. We need a lot more people like you in our education system.
Thank you, sir. Looking forward to meeting. Thank you, Dr.